I chose chapter 11 for my chapter analysis essay because I resonated with the topic, which was cultures, communications, and conflict. Because a part of understanding culture and understanding communication as a whole is viewing not just the good and how it can connect people and how it can do all these good things, but also how, due to culture and due to communications, conflict is something that arises still, and it can arise in many different ways, as stated in the chapter, like stereotyping and just in general language. For example, starting off the chapter, there's an example given about how someone hears something that another person said in a different language and they get offended by it, automatically assuming stuff. And I think what the point of the chapter was, and what I believe is a very important thing when studying communications and culture, is understanding how those two factors lead to conflict approach. And the approach to conflict can be in multiple different ways. Like, there's an aggressive style, there's a lot of different styles of which people can approach conflict, and a part of that is also knowing how, for as a whole, conflict in intercultural matters is seen very objectively, as opposed to subjectively, meaning in a lot of scenarios people look at conflict in intercultural matters and view it with factual and or any evidence provided, as opposed to viewing it with the fact that there is a lot of emotions behind it and feelings behind it, which tie back to not only history and a lot of other factors, such as history, political matters, and so many more issues, like people's personal agendas, racial issues. But also, I believe that viewing this chapter, I read a lot about. Um, I kind of got a self vocabulary word, which was face work, and I never really was able to put my own personal experience into like a word, and face work kind of encapsulates it in a very interesting manner. And I think that was very interesting, seeing how like it makes so much sense, but it's not just something in my culture, but in a lot of other cultures as well. And face work essentially is the concept of protecting one's own identity. And from speaking from personal experience, South Asian culture will teach you that you should protect your own personal image as opposed to just doing the right thing, right? Like, you would rather want to preserve your own personal image and what people think of you, and it creates a sort of conscious way of thinking, especially in conflict, where you might want to confront someone, or you might want to not say something, or you believe a certain way, but due to culture forcing you to want to do a certain thing purely because of image. And then another aspect that goes into that is gender conflict. And I think this is like something that's in a lot of cultures as well, but especially in South Asian culture, where there's a huge separation, where men are told to act a certain way, do certain things, and behave a certain way, talk in a certain way. And that also goes into conflict, where we're taught to sort of just attack every problem and be very expressive, which is one of the styles. And in my own personal life, I've noticed a lot of men who do that because that's what they've been taught. And it's very different seeing two men argue versus a man and a woman argue, where the women are taught to sort of be suppressed in a manner where they're not as expressive, and they're sort of holding back, and they're restrictive. And I think that's part of culture as well as religion, where viewed in the wrong way can also lead you to believe that conflict and all this can just be generalized. And I think that's a huge mistake that a lot of people have, where they see a certain culture or a certain group of people do something from a certain region, and they attach that sort of concept to a whole, which kind of just dissipates the idea of it. And another example that I kind of disagreed with was the chapter talked about the the conflict between Pakistan and India. And in that, I kind of understand because I see it from an outside perspective as well, of seeing it from the news and like articles and so on and so forth, where you kind of understand that there is just a huge conflict going on. However, a lot of people in Kashmir that I know personally, my own family and extended family, they are able to tell you that it's not just personal conflict. It's not like it's very small conflicts that then is blown out of proportion to make it seem as if there is a large conflict between India and Pakistan, which that's what it gets blown into by the government and by the people who control media in that area, especially. Oh, and from my own personal experience, like a lot of the conflict is very small initially. However, it does become way larger due to the concept of, again, face work. India wants to preserve its own image, and Pakistan wants to preserve its own image. And that also goes into everything else that they do. And I think a large part of it is also just cultural, but also religious. There is a very strong amount of Muslims in Pakistan as opposed to Hindus in India, and their cultural divide following their partition from um, Britain led to a lot of religious displacement and cultural displacement as we see it now. And it just, I think a large aspect of that, understanding that, is that you can't generalize. And I think that's the main topic and how I kind of viewed this chapter in a way where some of the other research that I did was from Sujin Lee, who did a more experimental way of understanding topics and everything. And it kind of led to the same conclusion that it is very personal. Yes, there is aspects of culture and communication that are can be generalized. However, human beings are so individualistic. And I saw some old work from Martin and Nakayama as well, and like viewing their old work as well, you kind of understand that it is all sort of mended together, and you understand that it's not just a general idea, but you can study it in that way. But I believe that seeing conflict from a more subjective manner is way more logical than objective.